Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Mr. Ian Teaches English. Today is a very important episode. This is the first episode that we are going to talk about types of clauses. We're going to talk about adjective clauses. And while I was filming this, I realized that I need a whole nother video to talk about some more aspects of adjective clauses. So this is, it's more than an introduction. This will give you the basics of adjective clauses so you can begin to recognize them and you can begin to use them. But stay tuned. I am going to create a part 2 that's going to explain some of the more important details, some of the more complex details about these adjective clauses. So enough of me talking. Let's jump in. All right, let's talk about adjective clauses here. A great way for you to make your speaking and your writing a lot more complex. So adjectives. You know what adjectives are. These are words that describe nouns. Clauses, you should know what this is because I released a video about it last week. Clauses are a group of words that have a subject and a verb. It's important that there are both. If you only have one or only the other, that's not a clause. So let's combine these two ideas. Let's combine the idea of adjectives and the idea of clauses and put them together into adjective clauses. Now this allows you to be a lot more complex, a lot more detailed, but you have a group of words that work together with a subject and verb to describe a noun. Now here are some examples. On the left, you'll see just simple adjectives. Red, big, nice. Those are great. But on the right, you'll see adjective clauses. And we'll talk about how we make them in a second, but I want you to see what they look like here, and maybe you can figure out how to use them even without me telling you. So, the adjective a red car, or the adjective red, we can also use an adjective clause, a car that's red. Now this is a clause because we have that as a subject and is as the verb. We have a subject and verb, and this clause together, that's red, describes car. It is an adjective clause. A big house is a regular adjective. A house that's big is an adjective clause. A nice guy, a guy who's nice. Red cars, using plurals now. Cars that are red. Big houses, houses that are big. Nice guys, guys who are nice. So, both of these, if you use them in a sentence, they work perfectly. They're both good English. We'll see in the next little bit that adjective clauses allow you to be more detailed, and that's important. Now let's look at the introduction words that are used with adjective clauses. Most adjective clauses are introduced by one of three words: who, that, or which. If you're describing people, use who or that. If you're describing things, use that or which. So, if you just want to be lazy, you can use that all the time. But I do recommend using who with people. Using that with a person is a little bit rude. It's possible, but I don't like it. So let's look at the examples with people. The man who just left wasn't very nice. We have the adjective clause here in yellow and the main clause in white, and that's important. You'll need to be able to recognize the main clause from the adjective clause. So, who just left, we use who because we are describing man. These adjective clauses come after the noun they describe. The second one, the boss who I worked with last summer got a promotion. The adjective clause, who I worked with last summer, describes boss. Because boss is a person, we use who. And describing things, the dog that bit me is white and gray. That bit me describes dog. Which dog? There are a lot of dogs. The dog that bit me. That we use that with this one. Now, you will find that some people might use who with a dog, maybe like a family pet, but that's really more inside of a family. For a dog, when you're walking on the street that comes up and bites you, probably isn't in your family, and you probably don't care about talking about them like a person. And the last one here, the house that we made an offer on just sold. House is definitely not a person. It is a thing, so we use that to introduce it. All right, so these introduction words of that, who, or which can be mandatory or they can be optional. Well, be careful here. Clauses need to have subjects and verbs. Now, if your clause already has a subject and verb, the introduction word is optional. If you don't already have a subject and verb, then the introduction word becomes that subject. And here's some examples about what I mean. The window that broke hasn't been replaced. In this sentence, the introduction word that is mandatory because look at the adjective clause here. That broke. Broke is our verb. We don't really have a subject, so we use that introduction word as the subject. That broke. But look at the next one. The window that I just bought is broken. Now here it's optional because I just bought is a subject and verb. So we can remove that, and many times we do, and say the window I just bought is broken. So it's possible that you have these signal words, these introduction words to help you recognize adjective clauses, but it's also possible that you don't. The next example with teacher. My teacher, who's young, is very professional. This one is mandatory because your verb is and you don't have another subject already. Clauses must have subjects and verbs, so the word who is used as the subject. But the second one, my teacher, who I told you about, is retiring. Here we already have a subject and verb, I told, so the word who is optional. You can take it away, and many times people do. So when you're looking at this, make sure you look at the clause itself. Does it already have a subject? Does it already have a verb? If it does, you can take away the introduction word and say, my teacher, I told you about, is retiring. All right, so here's some practice. I want you to do two things. The first thing I want you to do is to identify the adjective clause inside of the main clause. So you really need to be able to tell the difference between the main clause and the adjective clause, because you can take away the adjective clause and still have the main idea of the sentence. So do that. See if you can figure out where the adjective clause is and where the main clause is. And also tell me if the introduction word is optional. So go ahead, pause the video, take a moment to read these sentences and figure out if it is optional or mandatory with the introduction word. All right, so here are all the answers on the screen. Let's go through them. The movie that we watched last night was pretty good. That we watched last night is the adjective clause, and the introduction word is optional. The movie we watched last night was pretty good. Number 2, the day that we got married was snowy. This is also optional. The word that is optional because we already have a subject and verb, we got, so it's not necessary. Number 3, however, the introduction word is mandatory. My doctor, who looked at my x-ray, said it was fine. Here, we've got the word look as the verb, but we don't have another subject, so we must use who for that. All right, I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker, but if you have questions about them, if you're confused about this idea, put them in the comments. Also, try to create some of your own adjective clauses. Number 4, my sister who's older lives in Georgia. This is mandatory, and the adjective clause is who's older. Number 5, the point that you made in the meeting this morning was really good. It's optional. We can remove the word that and it's still good. The point you made in the meeting was really good. Number 6, the target that's on the left is yours. This is mandatory because we don't have another subject, so we need the introduction word. Number 7, the store that you got it from should take it back. This is optional. And number 8, her kid who's failing school needs help. This one is mandatory. So as you are creating these adjective clauses, as you are trying to be more complex and descriptive with your English, don't forget that you can use these introduction words, or maybe you don't have to. And when you're listening to English, make sure that you're not always listening for these introduction words, because sometimes they're not there. All right, now why is this important? This is important for two main reasons. The first one, which I was talking about in my class just this morning, is learning how to identify these will help you understand larger sentences. When you read books in English, you'll start to see sentences that are 3 or 4 lines long with a lot of commas in them, maybe. If you are able to identify the adjective clauses, and I'm going to make some videos on noun clauses and adverb clauses as well. If you can separate those from the main clause, it will help you understand the sentence. You'll know which parts are necessary and which parts are optional. And the second part, this lets you create more detailed, complex sentences. So for example, in the sentence we talked about earlier, the boss I worked with last summer, there's not an adjective in English for somebody I worked with last summer. So you must use an adjective clause if you want to use that very detailed adjective description idea. Maybe you could say my old boss or my former boss, but that doesn't give as much detail as saying when you worked for him. So you can use these to create much more complex and detailed sentences, and go ahead and try in the chat or in the comments below. Try and make a sentence with it. I'll tell you if you did well or if there's something you need to work on. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that now you are more able to identify these clauses, which are used all the time in English. My challenge to you is to go get your book, your English book that I know you're reading every day because you're learning English. Open it up and see if you can identify some of these adjective clauses, because I promise if you take some of the big sentences that you see in English, you can probably divide them and separate the different clauses, which will help you understand it more. So go ahead and do that. And while you're at it, I don't think anybody watches these videos all the way to the end. So if you're still here, say something down in the comments. Let me know that you watched this final part. Either way, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.